Welcome back to the Playbook here on WCRL Classic Hits 95.3. Of course, brought to you by Cadence Bank. If you want to get out on the phones, 274-9530. Adam, I know coming into college football season, one of the things you got to go do if you're a college football fan, you got to go buy Phil Steele's College Football Magazine. It's one of the best, of course, out there.
It's a must. Got to go pick it up.
We've got our copy here, but we can do one a little bit better for, of course, the listeners. We've actually got the man, the myth, the legend, Phil Steele on the phone with us. Phil, college football is right around the corner, is it not?
Yeah, it is. The camp's just about to kick off any day now, and I tell you what, it's always exciting this time of year.
You know, here in Alabama, of course, the two main schools, Alabama, Auburn. Alabama coming off the national championship, a brand new quarterback's going to be coming in this year. How important is it for Saban and them to find a quarterback? Because when you look at Saban's history, he's done a pretty good job of winning with first-year quarterbacks.
Yeah, in fact, you look at the last four first-year starting quarterbacks Alabama has had. How about 3 national titles and also a playoff berth a couple of years ago, even though they lost in the first round. It's really a remarkable record. And, you know, when you look at what the choices they have to make, Cooper Bateman, Jalen Hurts, Blake Barnett, the 3 main contenders for the job, I don't think they can really go wrong with whoever they pick. And the Alabama offense is not geared on the quarterback making a lot of big plays in the games. They're based on defense, special teams, and the run game. And the Tide figure to be strong in all 3 of those areas this year. So I think we've learned our lesson throughout the years is that Alabama does not need a quarterback to come in and throw for 3,000 yards. Even last year, Jacob Coker lost his job early on, and in the one game they experimented at the position, Cooper Bateman came in, turnovers hurt him, and they ended up losing Ole Miss, but then didn't lose a game down the stretch. And I thought Coker became a better quarterback as the season went on, which is pretty much the case for the Alabama quarterbacks each year.
Right now, from what you see, do you think maybe Saban goes the direction of maybe the redshirt freshman with Blake Barnett, or does he go with someone like Cooper Bateman?
Yeah, I projected in the magazine Cooper Bateman, but it was by the thinnest of margins. And, you know, I'm not discounting the true freshman either, Jalen Hurts. Hurts was actually in for the winter practices last year for the bowl. He gives them that mobility at the position. He's definitely the most athletic of the 3 quarterbacks. And I was impressed with what I saw of him in the spring game. He's a guy that squats 525 pounds. So I think when you look at the QB position, it's pretty much wide open. And I wouldn't expect a starter to be named until a couple of weeks into fall practice.
Phil, you touched on it. You know, Alabama not really built around the quarterback position. When you think of Alabama and Nick Saban, his tenure there, you know, they're built on defense. Of course, they lose Kirby Smart this year, insert Jeremy Pruitt. What do you feel like as far as the defense? I know there's a lot of guys coming back, but what's one of the bigger question marks in your eyes on that defensive side of the ball?
Can they generate the same amount of pass rush as they did last year? You take a player like a Tim Williams. Tim Williams last year had 10.5 sacks, but Tim Williams was basically a pass rusher last year. Now, if they use him in all 3 downs, will he be as effective a pass rusher as he was last year? Can Jonathan Allen have the type of year he has? I think when you look at the overall depth of the defense, the depth might not match what they had last year, but what I do like is the overall talent level. Jonathan Allen, Reuben Foster, Eddie Jackson, all 3 guys turning down the NFL this year, opting to return. That gives them 5 starters back, and that doesn't even count a player like Williams, who was highly productive last year. So I still think they have the best defense in the country, but depth is lacking. Experienced depth, I should say, is lacking a little bit with the team.
Joining us on the Main Street Family Urgent Care Hotline, Phil Steele of Phil Steele College Football Preview. Going from quarterback maybe to the running back position, Saban's never had a problem finding a good running back, a good workhorse, and last year was probably one of the best he's probably ever had in his coaching career, in Derrick Henry winning the Heisman. Can the young, inexperienced running backs hold their own this year?
Yeah, normally what we've seen out of Alabama is two running backs coming into the season and sort of splitting the carries. One guy ends up with more yards, and then it doesn't matter if he's gone. They've got an experienced backup that comes in, steps right in. That's probably the least experienced the running back core has been in quite some time. But look at the top 3 candidates they got going for him. You take a look at Damian Harris. He was the number 1 running back out of high school last year, got his feet wet, ran for 157 yards. Last season, and he was an MVP in the spring game. I think he's poised for a big year. Bo Scarborough, who is 230 30-some-odd pounds. He's a guy that reminds you of Derrick Henry size-wise, and I think a lot of folks are thinking he can shoulder a big part of the load. And then the true freshman, B.J. Emmons. So I think with that kind of depth, you may see more of a running back by committee, but I think that Alabama's going to be extremely solid in that area.
You mean it seems like after a few weeks, you see that running back committee. Could we see Saban maybe zero in on one running back?
Yeah, I think Damian Harris might be that guy. When I watch it now, Scarborough could be your workhorse guy, but Damian Harris just seems to have a little more burst going for him.
Yeah.
So I think Harris is the guy that I projected to end up the feature back by the end of the season.
Phil, before we turn the page and talk about Auburn, when you look at Alabama, interesting to get your perception of the Alabama dynasty that they have going over, especially since Saban's been there the last 10 years. How would you compare that to some similar runs maybe some other teams have had in the past, say Miami Hurricanes or Oklahoma back in the day?
I'm going to have to put it among the best of all time because, you go back to the 70s, for example, there was unlimited scholarships. Now in the era of 85 scholarships, you can only sign so many players in each recruiting class. I remember Bear Bryant used to go ahead and sign players just to keep them away from playing with his rivals, Tennessee or LSU or the other big teams out there back then. Can't do that anymore. So with the limited amount of scholarships, a lot more parity in college football, it's amazing that Alabama has been this dominant that they have in recent years.
Flipping the page now to Auburn, they start off, of course, week 1 versus Clemson at home at Jordan-Hare Stadium. You know, when you look at Auburn under Gus Malzahn, when he's been there as a coordinator and as the head coach now, quarterback's always been the question. He had Cam Newton in 2010 and 13 and 14. He had Nick Marshall. Last year, we know it didn't go so well, with Jeremy Johnson and Sean White at the helm. Who do you feel like will start week 1 versus Clemson? And and does Gus Malzahn need to have that guy who's really mobile, really athletic at the quarterback position for them to be able to produce wins and be good offensively?
Yeah, I think the proof of that happened last year, that they really need a mobile quarterback to be their most efficient. You look at what Malzahn did his first 2 years as the head coach. He had the mobile quarterback, as you touched on, and they averaged 37.5 points per game. Last year, that mobility at quarterback wasn't really there, and they only averaged 27.5 points per game. That's 10 points per game less. Now, I do think that the JUCO, John Franklin III, ends up winning the job, brings back that quarterback run threat, which really opens up the entire offense because now you have to bring a linebacker or safety in the box to account for the quarterback runs, and all of a sudden you see some wide-open receivers down the field. Franklin's accuracy was a concern a little bit in the spring, but I think he'll pick it up, and I think his mobility will really help this offense go. A guy like Jovan Robinson last year, I thought, emerged down the stretch, did a much better job of running back down the stretch, so I think he's going to have a big year this year, and the QB mobility, to me, is the big factor.
Joining us on the Main Street Family Urgent Care Hotline, of course, is Phil Steele. Phil, new defensive coordinator again for Gus Malzahn. This time it's Kevin Steele, who Bama fans know pretty well, and LSU fans also. What is the biggest key for Phil Steele, or for Kevin Steele, in this defense this year?
I think the key is going to be staying healthy. Last year I liked what I saw at Auburn in the first half of the first game, and then Carl Lawson goes and gets injured, and he's out for a good portion of the year. And when he returned later in the year, I thought Auburn's defense all of a sudden had some bite again. You look at the bowl game, they took on a team like Paxton Lynch in Memphis and held them to about 200 yards total offense. I like them up front with Dontavius Russell, Montravius Adams, and Carl Lawson. They've got a pretty good defensive line. That doesn't even count true freshman Marlon Davidson. So that's going to be strong up front. The secondary looks to be solid as well with Carlton Davis, Rudy Ford, Trey Matthews. So overall, I think as long as they stay healthy, you're going to see Auburn have a much better defense this year, especially after giving up 405 yards per game last season.
Do you think Auburn fans should expect to see maybe the same style of defense that that other school down in Tuscaloosa has, since Kevin Steele's basically came from the same coaching tree with Saban?
I think you'll see some of it, and you're also going to see some of what Muschamp laid the ground with last year. In fact, Muschamp and Steele are pretty similar on the defensive side of the ball, and they're trying to keep the defenses as close as possible to limit the effect of a coordinator change at this point. So I think it's going to be maybe a little bit closer to what they had last year.
Phil, coming into the year, after last season for the Auburn Tigers and coming into spring and now into summer, a lot of people talk about Gus Malzahn and that he's on the hot seat. He come in 13, went to the national championship game immediately. Last 2 years have not kind of been up to par for the Auburn Tigers. How hot do you really think the seat is for Gus Malzahn this year, and what does he have to do on the field?
Well, I am going to put my coaches on the hot seat article up in August, and I can tell you he'll be on there because, I think he raised the level of expectations, got everybody thinking that this was a team that was going to be contending at the very top. And let's face it, if you're at Auburn and you're a couple notches below Alabama, you just can't really have that. So I think that Gus Malzahn's going to have to go out there and have a much better year this year, talking about at least 8 or 9 wins. Can't have another 7-win season where it's barely making it to a bowl game at 6-6 and then needing a win just to have a winning season. I think they can be more productive this year when I look at the schedule. There's some toss-up games on there, which I think they have a shot at winning. Like even the Clemson game out of the box, I think is a very important one for them. Maybe at Georgia could be a big one. But I think Malzahn is on the hot seat and is going to need an 8 or 9 win season.
Well, that was going to be my next question. You kind of answered it, but how many wins? What's that number for Gus Malzahn to keep his job for next season?
Yeah, I'm going to say 8 or 9 at this point. And, when I look at the season coming in, they could be an underdog in 5 games. I think they're an underdog home against Clemson, home against LSU, at Mississippi, potentially at Georgia if their running backs are healthy, and at Alabama. So that means they're going to have to pull an upset or two somewhere along the line. But they're not a huge underdog in any game this year and fully capable of it. Keep in mind, this is a team that last year was the pick to win the SEC overall by the media. Now, I had Alabama, but the media overall had Auburn to win it, and usually I see a bounce back from teams like that. Teams that massively disappoint one year usually have a big-time improvement the next year.
Well, the SEC media, they've done pretty decent with all their picks, haven't they, in the last 25 years?
3 out of 20, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty decent. Let's talk about that game against Clemson because, that's a tough opening game. Of course, you do get the benefit they're at home against Clemson. What should Auburn fans expect week 1 going against a team that went to the national championship last year and almost won the thing?
Well, as anybody who watch a championship game looks at, this is a Clemson team that's got the best offense in college football. 550 yards against Alabama's defense in the championship game last year. Phenomenal. They've got Watson back at QB, 8 starters back overall on the offensive side, and they get back in a player like Mike Williams, who was their top receiver last year. He ran into a goalpost in week 1 and missed the year. He's back and healthy. So that's an explosive offense. Defensively, they only have 4 returning starters, but last year they only had 3. Still had a pretty good defense. So this is a very good Clemson team, a legitimate national title contender, and I think it's going to be a very good test for Auburn out of the box to see what type of level they're at coming into the season.
Switching gears, get away from Alabama and Auburn just for a few minutes. Georgia, that's one of the teams I really like this year, and it's Kirby Smart and his new job over there. What do you expect from Kirby this year, and for Georgia fans, maybe double-digit wins possibly?
There is that possibility. I think they're going to need to get Nick Chubb and Sony Michel healthy. Chubb coming off the knee injury, still not 100% right now. Michel coming off the broken arm, will he be 100%? If those two are healthy, here's what I like about Georgia, the fact that last year they had a top 10 defense. They only gave up 306 yards per game. They got 6 starters back on the defensive side of the ball, and Kirby Smart usually molds a pretty good defense. He's had one of the best defenses in the country each of his years as a defense coordinator at Alabama. I think they should have a pretty good D. When you look at them offensively, I thought the O-line underachieved a little bit, but I still, last year, and I think with the experience level that they have, I have them rated the number 7 offensive line in the country. If those running backs are solid, I think Jacob Eason wins the starting quarterback job. He's my number 1 rated QB out of high school. And then when you look at the schedule this year, if they open up with that win over North Carolina, the road game at Ole Miss will be an underdog, and maybe a home game against Tennessee, which is a toss-up right now, the Florida game a toss-up. But this is a team very capable of getting double-digit wins, provided they get their running backs healthy.
Well, Phil, we're about a month away from the kickoff of college football season. The opening weekend, great slate of games. You got Alabama, USC, Auburn, Clemson, Florida State, Ole Miss. What game will Phil Steele be most looking forward to watching the opening weekend?
Well, I got 12 TVs in front of me, so the good thing is I get to watch them all. So,
Perfect.
But I think the one that's going to tell the most as far as bragging rights for conferences go is maybe UCLA at Texas A&M because it's SEC, it's Pac-12, it's two teams that have the potential for contending in their divisions. And, as we saw last year when A&M waxed Arizona State in the opener, that pretty much quieted all those Pac-12 critics that were saying, hey, we've got the best conference out there. So I think it's an important game right out of the box, and it's going to hold some bragging rights for the whole year.
Well, Phil, we appreciate you coming on with us here on the Main Street Family Urgent Care Hotline, and we hope to talk to you maybe in the future, and hopefully college football will be another great year for us.
Hey, sounds great. A lot of fun talking football with you guys tonight.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks.